Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jen, and I'm going to be your host for the session today. And today, we're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics, which is automation and automated service delivery. Before we get started with today's session, just a few things in terms of the logistics, so that we know that everything will run smoothly in the next 35 minutes. Please note that our entire session today is being recorded. You will get an overview of the slides after the session has ended, and there's no need to take any screenshots or photos from anything that we are presenting. Also note that the whole purpose of joining a webinar session online is that you have the opportunity to ask questions, and please do so by using the Q&A box, which you see on the left-hand side of your screen. Last but not least, we will be sharing all of the PowerPoint slides after the session has ended. So if you've registered, you will automatically receive a link with the recording, as well as an overview of the entire slide deck. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get started and look at a brief introduction about automation. But before we do get started, let me tell you a little bit about the Data Science Institute and the organization that is making today's webinar session possible. My name is Jan-Willem Middelburg. I'm a director at Sapiens and the president of the Data Science Institute, which makes this series of informational webinars possible. Over the course of the years, I've been involved in many publications, some of which you will see on the screen today. And the Service Automation Framework, which is depicted all the way on the left-hand side of your screen, is actually one of the first books I ever wrote. And today I'm extremely pleased to give you some information around how you can use that to introduce automated services within your own organization. Good. For today, we are going to take a bit of a deep dive. For those of you who have joined our previous sessions, you might know that we're always trying to cover a few informational and educational learning points that go a few steps deeper than what you can just find in a blog or somewhere online. In today's session, we're going to look specifically around the concept of service and service delivery and how automation technologies are transforming the way that we consume and utilize services on a day-to-day basis. Specifically, we are going to be looking at service automation and automation technologies and how artificial intelligence technologies, and especially agentic AI, is changing the way that we consume services on a day-to-day basis. After we've covered some of these technologies, I'm also going to be diving a little bit deeper in what you can do in your own organization to leverage some of those capabilities. And we will specifically look at a few key points in order to get started. Towards the end of today's session, we're going to be running a full Q&A. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to put them into the chat, which you see on the left-hand side of your screen. Good. So let me start with setting the scene a little bit and discuss what the organization behind this is trying to achieve. This webinar is hosted by the Data Science Institute, better known as DASCIN, which is an independent body of knowledge for the development and advancement of data best practices. It might not be a big surprise that today's topic is primarily related around data and understanding how you can use that data in order to make decisions faster, better, and smarter. If you want to learn more about the Data Science Institute, and I would strongly encourage you to check out their website on www.dascin.org. Some of the materials that you are going to be seeing today are coming from the first book that I ever published, which was in 2017, which is the Service Automation Framework. Please note that the models that are discussed in this book are subject to copyright, and they are part of the Service Automation official courses. You're free to use and distribute the slides that you receive after today's session, but you cannot just blindly utilize the model or build upon that without the proper license rights in place. Good. Now that we have that out of the way, let's get started with the core of our session today. First and foremost, I would like you to understand that the concept and the way in which we experience services is changing entirely. Whereas a decade ago, most services were still delivered in person, and we as people valued the personal touch of experiencing a service. Over the last decade, we have seen a transition towards more and more digital consumption of services. And the key technology that has been driving this is the fact that automated service consumption is becoming easier and easier. If you've been to the airport, you will probably have used one of those online check-in machines or kiosks in which you can check in yourself and print your tickets and baggage tags. If you have been using fast food chains like McDonald's or KFC, there's now typically screens on the wall in which you can place your order immediately. But it goes further than that. Lots of organizations are trying to provide a better customer experience by delivering services automatically. Some of you might have already seen that this is, for instance, happening in hotels, which you see here on the left-hand side of the screen, where customers can check in, get their room keys automatically just by arriving and putting in their details in a specific self-service portal. And this goes even further than just physical touch. Lots of service providers have made services available directly on phones. And to build on the example that I used before, some hotels now send a digital room key to your phone, which you can then use to put your phone in front of the card reader. And you can literally use your phone as a key card in order to access a hotel. All of these are newer and more recent innovations in which we see that there is a strong focus on the automation of the service delivery process. And not only is that faster and cheaper and typically easier to operate, in many cases it also provides convenience. And therefore end users prefer to use these kinds of solutions over the traditional human-led kinds of services. Now, it's also fair to say that this service automation aspect is only at its very early stages. Because in the last 3 to 4 years, AI has been accelerating the capabilities, but also the amounts of possible use cases for automated services. And I'm going to explain a little bit on why this is very, very significant, and why in many cases of service delivery, this is solving a problem that we weren't able to solve before. Because one of the most frequent criticisms with automated services and automated processes in general has always been that there is a uniform experience. What I mean with that is that the process that is being executed in the backend, frequently driven by an RPA bot or some other form of process and workflow automation, is typically doing things in the same manner over and over again. And as a result, you get into a situation where the service is consumed in the exact same way for everyone who's using the service. Think back about the example that I showed you before. If you are checking in for your hotel or you're ordering food through some kind of a self-service portal, that portal is the same for everyone. It's the same menu. It's the same way to check into your room. There's nothing customized or tailored about that. And that makes the service experience in many cases uniform, and therefore also not always the best, because different people have different needs. Now, what's happening with AI is that this concept of automated service delivery is now getting towards a phase where it's actually becoming smart. And by using large language models or other AI-driven technologies, we are now not only able to create a service experience very fast, but also one that is highly customized and highly trained upon your personal preferences. And that means that service experience is going to be different for different people. Even if we're consuming the exact same service, we might get different outputs and different outcomes depending on who we are, or the types of questions that we ask, or the kinds of information that we actually provide. So this development and this technology now makes it possible to deliver automated services that are not just fast and reliable. It helps to deliver services which are completely customized and tailored to you individually. And in my opinion, this is gonna drive a next wave of highly intelligent, fully customized services for organizations, and is in that sense completely transforming different business models. And some of the examples that you see on the screen have already taken very significant steps around that. If you look at organizations like Grab or Booking or Netflix, all of these are completely automated companies which deliver fully automated services. I'm presenting from Southeast Asia today, and organizations like Grab have figured out a way in which you completely automate food delivery, groceries, moving packages from back and forth, and even payment processes. In all of these services that they provide, they have taken one thing in common, and that is that they took an existing service like shopping, or like getting a ride, or like booking transport, and they have completely automated every single step of the way. And what makes these companies very successful is that the model that they're choosing to deliver to their end users is very fast, it's very reliable, and as a result, people tend to come back, and it provides a better service or customer experience than what was delivered before. And I think that the companies that you see here on the screen are kind of one of the main primary motivators to start looking into the concept of automated services, because it very strongly shows that automated services are very successful, and that the fact that you don't provide a analog service, it does not necessarily mean that the service is any less good. And I think the success and the stock prices and the share price of these companies kind of show that you can be very, very successful by embracing the concept of service automation. Now, let's talk about this a little bit more from a business point of view. And what I've done to kind of make the case or convince you that service automation is a trend that you should look into is list some of the primary business benefits. And the first one of those is very clearly that automated services are very, very scalable. If you deliver a digital service, an automated service, then it means that you can scale up that business very, very quickly. From a technology point of view, it doesn't really matter whether you're delivering services to 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 people. Yes, you will obviously need to upgrade your infrastructure along the way, but the concept of delivering a service through workflow or through bots in the backend basically means that things can be delivered faster and cheaper. Second of all, it means that it is becoming fact-driven. If you are delivering a automated digital service to your end consumers, you can basically track and trace everything. You will see exactly where people clicked, where they didn't click, how much time they spent on a page, which particular buttons they pushed, what information they filled, what information they were looking for. So by using automated services, you assist your own organization in becoming more data-driven, because every single step people take on your platform and in your interface can be tracked and traced and used for future improvement. Thirdly, take into account that service automation is highly user-centric. And the service in itself is based on the behavior and the preferences of the user. And in that sense, automated services are very black and white, because if people don't like the service, or the interface is not performing well, or it takes too long and the service, for instance, is very slow, then people will turn to other alternatives. So by adopting an automated service approach, you're forcing yourself and your organization to focus on the key things that your end users actually want. And from that perspective, it's very, very user focused. Fourthly, and I tend to call this the CFO argument, service automation, especially at scale, is significantly more cost efficient. Why? Well, software robots don't require overtime, they never go on vacation, they don't need any salary increases. So it is a highly efficient and effective model of service delivery part. They never get sick, they never leave. So from a delivery perspective, it's highly, highly efficient. And because robots are very quick and can do a lot of things at the same time, the capability and the costs involved are typically much more optimized compared to analog or manual processes. And last but not least, and I think that this is probably one of the most important arguments, is that by understanding customer behavior, by understanding what people want and how they are consuming services on an ongoing basis, you can start to take steps in order to exceed those user expectations on an ongoing basis. And I think that that is really one of the most critical aspects to take into consideration. So if you weren't convinced by the companies that I showed you on the previous slide, I hope that these elements give you a bit of a better understanding of why service automation is such an incredibly relevant trend that you should definitely take a look into. Good. So based upon that, you might now have a question around the how part. So suppose that you also would like to start delivering automated services. One of the most frequently occurring questions is, where do I start? How do I get this up and running? And to answer that question, we've developed and organized a concept which is known as the service automation framework. A number of critical steps and capabilities that you would need to build for your organization in order to start delivering those automated services. So let's talk about what the service automation framework is and how it has been shaping organizations in their transition towards an automated service delivery model. And I always like to explain this based on its key definition. The best way to look at a framework is something that is providing a structure. And if you look at the definition on Wikipedia, it says that the service automation framework is a set of best practices for the automated delivery of services, and that it builds on self-service concepts that are discussed in IT service management, and is there in the form of a number of key practices and processes. So first and foremost, I would like you to see the service automation framework as a structure, something that will provide you with a starting point in order to start the delivery of automated services in a quick and in an efficient manner. And on the next slide, I have given an overview of what the service automation framework looks like. Quickly speaking, the service automation framework consists of 6 critical components that you would need to take into consideration to make sure that you can start delivering automated services. And each of those addresses a different capability or a different element that you would need to make to consider to make automated services successful. I'm very, very briefly going to run you through it so that you learn a little bit more today than just the very basics. At the center of the framework, you see the concept of the user, because ultimately every automated service will be consumed by a specific user. Somebody that is using the service and wants to get some form of a value out of that. So before you can do anything, before you can start developing any kind of platform or technology or workflow, the first key question that you need to ask yourself is, who is my user? How do they consume a service? What are their key characteristics, and how are they? What are their requirements in terms of user experience? If you design the best service in the world, but you don't understand how people actually use that or how they would like to consume it, then your service is not going to be very successful. So that's where it starts, and that's why it's also at the center of the framework itself. Secondly, you need to design your service, and you need to design it based on the preferences of the user. Now, in an automated service, there will always be a number of different steps, because there is always some kind of computer that it needs to be able to execute tasks in the backend. Now, for those of you who have a bit of a computer or computer science background, you know that ultimately a computer does operations based on predefined processes, functions, and ultimately system calls that are happening on a piece of hardware. And in that sense, it means that you would need to define the steps that that process contains and how value is delivered as a service by executing those specific steps. So you need to have a very thorough understanding of the steps that make up your service before you can actually automate it. And that's a key concept that we call service design. You need to have a full understanding of the steps that your service runs through in order to have the background before you can even think about things like scripting and workflows. So starting from the inside out, we covered what is a user and how you design a service around that user. Now, the third, and not to be underestimated, key next element is the technology layer, because an automated service will always be delivered through a platform. It can be a mobile app, can be a web interface, it can be the self-service kiosk that I talked about all the way at the start. There will need to be some kind of an interface, because the whole concept here is to have the service automated. So that means that by definition, there's always a technology layer in between, and you need to design that technology. It needs to be fast, it needs to be user-friendly, it needs to look good. So graphic design, those are the kinds of things that you really need to think about when delivering an automated service. If the technology isn't working, if it's slow, if it's not properly functioning, then you will lose the people who need to consume with your automated service. So those three elements are kind of like what we call the design elements. Those are the key things that you would need to set up right from the start. Now, in the circles that you see around that, we focus on the delivery of those services. And the first key aspect that you need to make sure is set up is what we call automated deployment. Every user of an automated services will encounter a service for the first time. And in many of those cases, you would need to do either registration or setup, or you need to make sure that the people who consume that service are properly onboarded. And in some cases, that's simple, and you don't really need to have a lot of work to be done for that. But there's also cases, think like, for instance, online banking, where that process is a little bit more complex. And you would need to properly have steps in place to onboard somebody, to set up a bank account number for them, to do all kinds of validation checks before you can actually provide services to that user. And all of those steps combined, we call automated deployment. You can also refer to it as onboarding or getting started. All of those are definitions for the same concept. How can you make a user or customer utilize your service for the first time. And that combination is called automated deployment. Now, after automated deployment, the majority of the services are based on integrations with other systems or the fact that somebody actually needs to happen. So again, let's use the automated ordering of food. Then that request or that order needs to be processed in a kitchen somewhere. And for instance, a driver needs to get a message that they would need to pick it up and bring it to your home. In the case of automated banking services, it means that money needs to be able to be transferred between different bank accounts, and that there needs to be some form of authentication, and that there need to be all kinds of risk management checks in between. In every automated service delivery, there is something that needs to be arranged, something that needs to be delivered, because that's the reason why people consume automated services. And you need to ensure that in the backend, your processes have been set up in such a way that it actually delivers the value that you promise. Suppose that you are booking something through some kind of online app or portal, and you've paid and you're waiting and nothing happens. Then immediately your experience is going to be very, very poor. So service delivery automation ensures that the service does what it's supposed to do. And that is typically technically a little bit more complex than you might think if you're consuming services. So that means that there need to be integrations, it means there need to be APIs with other systems, typically data exchange, service buses, you name it. All of that work needs to be properly set up in the backend and be triggered automatically. So this is where RPA and agentic automation are going to come in. And then last but not least, we have serendipity management. So once you know the behavior of your customers, you can use that information in order to surprise them in a good way, in order to propose things that you know that they might like. And again, AI is going to play a transformative role in this, because we can better and better understand services and user behavior, and then adjust services towards specific preferences. So a very simple example is changing, for instance, the home or welcome screen based on your preferences, the information you've been looking for. With AI, that is nowadays obviously very simple, because you can just create a query, create a new picture, and upload that, so that every user will have their own automated background and their customized and tailored information specifically for them. Most organizations and even most digital service providers are still at the very, very early stage of this. And you don't see it in a lot of applications yet, but trust me when I say that this is going to become much more frequently occurring and is going to provide a much better service experience. I'm always spending a bit of time on this slide because it basically explains the core of what service automation is and what are the key areas that you would need to address to start delivering those automated services. So very schematically, what the service automation framework helps you with is to move from the delivery of a service which is analog, which is typically a number of interactions between a user and a service provider, towards a situation that you see on the right, where the interactions between a user and a service provider are delivered through some form of a self-service portal, and that user is consuming the steps of that service in a step-by-step manner. And that really is the transition that the service automation framework is facilitating. So you could say that this slide is kind of like, in a nutshell or in one overview, the transition that service automation makes. Now, obviously, that this is complex and it's something that doesn't happen overnight, but in a step-by-step manner, this is how you can utilize it to move from the situation at the left towards the situation on the right and start delivering automated services by yourself. Now, there's one new, or I would say almost new kid in town that enhances service automation even further. And that's also why today I called the webinar how service automation is going to change the delivery model of the future, because we are now having the capabilities and the technology available from artificial intelligence. Now, again, I'm not going to give an AI webinar because everyone in the world is talking about AI, and it's sometimes becoming a little bit over fatigued. But I would like to introduce you to another key term, and that is the concept of agentic automation. And very bluntly speaking, or on a very high level, you could say that the combination of workflow technology and RPA, together with the capabilities of large language models, generative AI, those key areas combined leads towards agents, and agents that are software agents, I should say, agents that can execute work independently. And that means that based on, for instance, your personal preferences, the questions that you might have, they will start doing and executing work immediately. And this is going to transform the way that services are being consumed very, very significantly. Because in the old days, or in the days that most organizations have it currently, the way in which a service is consumed is rule-based and rule-driven. So the situation that is happening behind automated services, still in today's day and age, 9 times out of 10, means that the actions are all sequential. So again, let's use the example that I started with, ordering food or going to a hotel or any other kind of check-in procedure. The steps and the buttons all lead you towards the same steps all of the same time. And regardless of who's consuming the service, it's the same for everyone. This is a rule-based approach, and it is typically covered by RPA kind of technologies. In the last few years, we have seen smarter uses of this. So for instance, you might have been using your phone to scan your passport when you check in, or you might be been able to take a photograph and it extracts all of the information from an expense report or from a claim or from a receipt. Basically, what's happening there is that we are still running an automated, rule-based kind of workflow, but we are injecting specific AI capabilities within specific steps. And I'd like to call that AI-driven RPA, because as you can see on the screen, 1 or 2 of those actions that you see right on the screen are powered by AI, but it's typically a point solution. So again, let's use a very simple example. If you are scanning a receipt to put into an expense claim or expense report, still the steps will be exactly the same. There will be a smart step in between where you take a picture, and that picture is automatically converted into a claim, and it's extracting the data, etc. But step by step, the process and the process organization is still the same. Now, the last step, which we are at right now, and with right now, I literally mean that this technology has only been available for a year, if you're a very early adopter, but for most organizations, just a few months, is agentic automation. And with agentic automation, the steps actually do become different. And the agent, based on the input that you give him, is able to change the direction of a workflow and execute different steps based on the input. And this is more complex than just a simple if-else rule. So in the first and the second example, you also see some ways in which there can be a separation and a robot can choose different courses of action. But in agentic automation, it will actually look at different actions by itself. And it might even take an action that it has never taken before. So that's really where it becomes very, very different, and it becomes very personalized. And that's the key element to really remember around agentic automation and how agents are going to radically change the customer and user experience as things move along. And I think that that's a very, very fascinating topic. Now, let's summarize a little bit on what we've talked about so far. So The key term that I really want you to take away is agentic automated services. So it is services delivered by not just an RPA or a bot, but by an agent. And with agentic automated services, we mean automated service delivery through AI agents. The key difference with traditional automated services is that the service is not just delivered by a rule-based robot, so it's not the same for everyone, but it's delivered by an AI agent, which enables you to completely customize that service based on the input that people give. And because there is an agent behind it, it doesn't necessarily need to make a rule-driven decision. It can optimize the best possible course of action based on the algorithm that it's using. And this has very significant benefits. The first one that I think is going to be the key driver for this technology is it enables you to have a completely customized and tailored experience. If two people open up the same service, it might have a completely different interface. It might have different pictures. It might have different questions. So even though we're consuming the same service from the start, it can be completely changed based on what people actually like behind it. And as a result, that is going to provide a better and more tailored customer and user experience. And as a result, I can already forecast that people are going to like those automated services even better because it's much more tailored towards their individual needs. And people consume services because they have needs. So it's very easy to kind of piece that together, that a better user experience is going to lead to more adoption. And then the third key element is also something not to understand. I've deliberately not gone today into the way that it works under the hood and the way that you can train and optimize your models. But if you're using these kinds of agents, it also means that you can update your service very easily because the robots, the agents are typically trained on information. And if you would like to change a traditional workflow, you would need to basically reconfigure it. But if you, for instance, would like to change the menu in a store, then all you would need to do with an agent is just upload a different version of the menu, and it will immediately start making decisions based upon that. In a more traditional RPA-driven environment, you would need to start reconfiguring the prices and information that it retrieves it from. So maintainability and a future readiness, if you want to call it, is also going to be significantly better. And then last but not least, again, the CFO argument, it has very significant cost savings. Many organizations today still use large service centers to provide support. That is not always working so well. They spend a lot of money on out of hours and night support and you name it. So having services that are driven by automated agents, which would be as good, if not better than human agents, has very significant cost savings. And that's also something to take into consideration. Now, a lot of people I spoke to over the last few months have asked, this sounds very nice, but how is this not a little bit too far in the future? And the answer to that question is blatantly no. Most technology providers that are a little bit more at the front end of the development cycle and that are known for their innovation already have workable, out-of-the-box solutions available with which you can configure, build, and train your own agent, and which you can use to enable automated services. The example I've listed right here is from the platform that almost everyone knows, OpenAI, that is known from ChatGPT. But what a few people actually know is that they also provide the capability to build agents. And they have a completely integrated agent builder that they call Agent Kit. And that helps you to develop and build an automation agent all by yourself. Now, obviously, that requires a bit more technical knowledge, but in case you're interested in learning this, I would strongly recommend to check out the tutorials around this because it provides great value and it's actually not that difficult. Good. Last key takeaway, I always like to do this whenever I'm giving any talk about the agentic automation or anything that's related to AI, is that you do need to take into account ethical and societal implications. Specifically, the models that you're using, the technology that is driving those AI models need to be validated and vetted for bias and fairness. Because if you let an agent make decisions, it can also make these decisions based on improper or undesirable societal implications. Another key aspect to really always take into consideration is that the key objective here is not just to get rid of jobs, but that there is going to be a transition from the work that is adding a very little value, like for instance answering a support question, towards training and making sure that these models get better. So you really need to think about job displacement, reskilling needs, etc. Thirdly, very much in line with bias, fairness, and AI decisions, you always need to think about data privacy and the specific regulations around that. Not every country had the same rules. For instance, in Europe, very famously around the GDPR, about which I gave a webinar a few weeks ago, those key areas are a must when you start thinking about building these kinds of agents. Data privacy regulations can lead to very heavy fines if you don't take them into account. So it's very incredibly important that you take that, do that right from the start. And then last but not least, you need to put in some safety, some controls, some governance rules that your automated decisions and services are not going to behave without any proper governance in place. And that if people deliberately try to test the system or try to ask things that are not appropriate, that there is proper controls in place to immediately escalate that or flag that or take specific actions. You should never just let the robots keep on doing what they're doing without any oversight and monitoring. In that sense, it's very similar to human agents, right? So in an organization, you also don't put people into a building and say, we're not going to be putting any rules or regulations in place. So same is true for agents and robot agents. You do need to put in place proper governance, security measures, especially for AI models. Good. I'm hoping that in the last half hour, you've become a little bit more inspired about what agentic automation can do and how it can drive the adoption of digital and automated services. I'm going to end today's session with giving you some practical next steps, obviously related to the Data Science Institute. And the first key area that I would like to point your attention to, in case you're interested in learning more about this, is that with the Data Science Institute, we're providing two main certifications that will learn you more about this. The RPA Foundation course focuses really around how do you build those robots, how do you make sure that you configure workflows, how can you understand the key components of RPA platforms, and how do you build this kind of automated workflows in the backend. The other main certification that I've basically been talking about in the last hour is the concept of service automation and the Service Automation Foundation course. And this is really more around the design part. So how do you design an automated service? What are the key areas that you need to take into consideration? How does the framework help you move from A to B? So in case you're interested in that, I strongly encourage you to check out the website, look at the course descriptions, whether this could be something for you to learn more about this. Other than that, I would like to recommend to download the resources and the white papers that we have available. The Data Science Institute produces a ton of free knowledge, white papers, webinars, knowledge artifacts that are typically available free of charge. I already mentioned things like AI ethics, the big data aspects, just to mention some of the key white papers that you see on the screen right here. So all of them are available as free downloads. If you want to learn more about this, again, take a moment to go to search and go to this link and download some of those white papers so that you are always up to date with the latest and greatest in the world of data science. Good, and time always flies when you're having fun. We've already come towards the end of our session today. So let's have a quick look at the questions that are there and see if any questions have come in during our talk. I actually see quite a number of questions already in place. So let me try to moderate those. Oh, over a dozen questions already. So let me take the ones which are most upvoted. Good. Quick first question is, do you see agentic AI replacing traditional self-service portals, or will they coexist in future service delivery models? Well, it's a very good question, but it's basically two conceptually different things. The self-service portal will always be there. That's the technology interface, the layer with which you're interacting. What, however, will be different is the technology that is executing those workflows. And in traditional RPA environments, that is driven by rule-based kind of RPA workflows and bots, robots, typically, as we call them. And with agentic automation, that technology is going to be powered by agents. So that's a fundamentally different thing. So the self-service portal will always remain the same, but the technology that is empowering the execution work, that technology is going to be slightly different. Good, very good question. Next one is also a very good question. It says, what is the biggest challenge with starting automation? And I've been involved in many automation projects, and I think the most important key difficulty and challenge is always getting people to understand that automation is not coming for their job. They're going to be there to make their life easier. And in the beginning, people are always a little bit afraid of what automation is doing and what it's there to bring. So winning the hearts and the minds of people in the beginning, I would say that is one of the, I would say, most key challenges that you would need to overcome. Good. Next one is, which software do you use for automating your services? It's a very good question. With the Data Institute, we are vendor independent, so I'm not going to be recommending specific technology. There's lots of different good providers out there, so try to have a look. And if you want some personal advice, you can always drop me a message. But in these kinds of sessions, we don't provide any specific technology advice. Good. Next one, what is the main difference between automation and service automation? That's actually quite a good question. I would say that automation is a container term, and basically means delivering any kind of workflow into a faster and more quick way to do things. Automation, for example, also is used in factories, mechanical automation. Service automation is different because it focuses on a subset of the automation space that is specifically for the service delivery industry. So think about HR automation, IT automation, anything that is traditionally a service. And that's a very specific focus area, because services are by definition intangible. So it's all about experience and the steps that you take in order to get towards that experience. So that's, I would say, one of the most fundamental differences. Good. I've tried to answer most of the questions on screen. I know there's still a few questions out there, but we really are out of time for today. So with that, I'm going to conclude today's session. Again, thanks so much again to all of you who are joining live. It's always a pleasure to see so many people in these kinds of sessions. I hope you found it today very useful. Thanks so much for the nice comments and all the thumbs up. And I look forward to seeing all of you again on any of our next upcoming webinar series. Thank you so much, and stay tuned and keep following the Data Science Institute. Bye.